The thing is, I wasn't hiding it from him. Not exactly. I just hadn't gotten around to explaining it. Every person carries something from before, something that belongs to an older version of themselves, and that part of me belonged to someone I had not been in 3 years. I wore the cover-up every summer we were together, every beach trip, every pool afternoon, every time his family came anywhere near water. 3 years, 3 summers. Nobody asked. My name is Marta. I am 33, and I write copy for a living, which means I spend my days choosing exactly which words to put in front of people so they feel what I have decided they should feel. I am good at it. The thing is, I have always been good at it. I have been with my husband for 5 years. Married for 2. He is a regional director at a logistics company, which means he travels from Monday through Thursday, and I have learned to sleep in the middle of the bed during the week without making much of it. 3 nights alone is a pattern. 4 is almost comfortable. I do not count past 4. The white linen cover-up hangs on the back of the bathroom door. 3 summers now. I put it on at any beach, any pool, anywhere there is water and people who might look. Nobody has asked about it. The thing is, people rarely ask about things that have been carefully arranged not to require asking. I am at my desk on a Tuesday morning, working through a campaign for a wellness brand built on radical transparency. My tagline from last year, "Nothing hidden, nothing held back," is still on the agency's website next to my headshot, which is a good photo. I do not think about the tagline much. Priya, who sits 2 desks over, asks how my weekend was. I say quiet, fine, nice. She gives me the look she gives when she had hoped for something better and says she doubts it. I smile. I leave it there. My husband calls from Frankfurt. We talk about the drive to the coast this Saturday. 5 days with his family, his parents Margaret and Tom, his sister Nora. Nora has always been cautiously warm toward me in the way people are when they are waiting for evidence they cannot yet name. He tells me Nora is excited to have real time together. I say good, and I mean it mostly. That evening I pack for the beach. The cover-up goes in first, then everything else, arranged around it. He appears in the doorway asking about his charger. I say left pocket. He says I am incredible. I say I know. He laughs, a good easy sound, and goes back to brushing his teeth. The thing is, I said it as a joke, but I also meant it. Those 2 things have always existed comfortably together in me, and for a long time I did not see why that should be a problem. He reached out through a platform I check maybe once a week. That was not an accident on his part. His name is Remy. He is 37, an architect, and we were together for 18 months during the part of my life before I had settled on who I was performing for. The message said he was in the city for a renovation project and was thinking of me, and was I free for coffee sometime. I read it 3 times, set the phone face down on the kitchen counter, and stood there. Then I picked it up again. There are people from your past who go abstract over time, who become an outline, a version, something you can file and move on from. He was not that. He was someone I had stood in a kitchen with at 2 in the morning arguing whether olive oil quality actually matters. Someone I had texted from my mother's 3rd wedding because I needed to tell someone who would understand why I was in the bathroom and not at the table. He was specific in a way that years had not dissolved. I met him at the coffee shop near the agency on a Wednesday noon. The window table was taken. We sat near the back and he ordered an espresso and looked the same as I remembered, which made the time between us feel thinner than it should have. We talked about the project, a building on the west side with original ironwork the owners wanted preserved. And he talked about it the way someone talks about work they still find genuinely interesting. I listened the way I listen to things that are not my problem. He asked about the agency, the campaigns. I told him about the wellness brand, the transparency angle. He said it suited me. I heard this as a compliment, and I let myself hear it as a compliment without looking at it too closely. He had a quality I had forgotten. a particular ease with silence after he said something, as if he trusted the words to do their work without help. My husband fills pauses. He is warm at it, good at it, but he fills them. Remy just waited, and something about the waiting made me keep talking. We stayed 2 hours. I stood on the sidewalk after, in the late spring light, before going back in. I had not thought about what I intended to do about any of this, and the not thinking was deliberate in a way I recognized and did not examine. I walked back with 17 minutes before my afternoon call. I told Priya I had had a long lunch. She said wonderful without asking anything further, which is one of the things I have always liked about her. She hears enough to be interested and stops before it gets complicated. She looked pleased in the uncomplicated way she looks when she has decided something is good. The following week I went to his studio on the east side. I told my husband I had a late evening at the agency. I told Priya I was seeing an old friend. The thing is, each of those sentences was technically accurate. What they added up to was not. There had been a night early in the marriage when I could not sleep. My husband sat up beside me and read aloud from what he was reading, which was a book about port logistics. He did not ask whether I wanted him to stop. He just read, quietly, for 45 minutes, until I was close enough to sleep to manage the rest on my own. I had not told him this mattered to me. I do not know if I had understood that it mattered to me. He had also learned the Jurek recipe from my mother's handwriting, transliterated into something he could use. He had gotten it almost right the first time, and eating it was a specific feeling I did not have another word for. The thing is, these were not small things. I had just learned to carry them quietly, and quiet carrying looks a lot like not needing. His promotion had come through 6 months before any of this. Regional director. Travel Monday through Thursday. He asked how I felt about it. I said wonderful, great for you, exactly right. I meant neither sentence fully, and he believed me because I said it in the tone of someone who means things. After that, he stopped asking how I felt about the travel. He was not cruel to stop asking. He was exhausted and grateful and working hard. But he stopped noticing that I had things to tell him, and I stopped seeming like someone who needed to be asked, and the distance between us arranged itself quietly into something we were both living in without naming. He did not know I had noticed the drift. Or perhaps he did and had concluded I was fine with it since I had told him I was. That was the loop. I performed fine, he believed fine, and the space widened without either of us calling it anything. Remy asked me nothing. He accepted whatever version arrived. I mistook this for understanding. It was indifference organized kindly. He did not need enough from me to care about the gaps. At the time, indifference organized kindly felt like relief. My husband came home the next Friday and mentioned carefully that his mother had texted asking what time to expect us for Sunday dinner. The dinner I had forgotten to bring up until the day before. He asked if everything was all right this month, named the dinner as his one concrete example, asked it plainly. I told him I had been deep in the campaign, losing track of days. It would slow down soon. He looked at me with the expression of someone who has decided to believe a thing because the alternative is harder, and went to hang up his coat. I told myself, this is how people manage. Compartments are not deception, they are organization. Nothing that mattered had changed. I had not stopped loving him. I told myself this and found it internally coherent, which is a different thing from being true, but close enough to function. Priya covered one of my absences without being asked, told the project manager I was with a client on a Tuesday afternoon when I was not. She mentioned it afterward in passing, and when I thanked her, she waved her hand and said it was close enough. There is a kind of friendship that runs on the excitement of being adjacent to someone who takes risks. I had been feeding that in her, and she had been feeding something in me I prefer not to name now. Celia worked 3 desks down and had eaten lunch with me most Tuesdays for 18 months. After the week of my first long lunch with Remy, she passed me in the hallway with an expression too careful. She had been in the break room when I came back that day. She began taking her meals to the conference room. No conversation, just a quiet repositioning. I filed it and kept working. The last Thursday before the vacation, Priya stopped by my desk and mentioned lightly that Celia had asked who I had been with at that long lunch. Priya had said she did not know. Celia had looked at her, Priya said, the way someone looks when they do not believe the answer but have decided not to push. I thanked her. I opened the campaign file. 2 days until the beach. The rental house sat 30 meters from the water and had a wooden porch running the full length, an outdoor shower along the south wall with wooden slats and a railing alongside it, and windows on every side that let in the ocean sound at night. The floors were pale wood. The furniture was the furniture of a place that gets rented and lived in without being truly lived in. Margaret and Tom had arrived first and stocked the refrigerator before we got there. A specific cheese, the crackers Tom favours, a jar of the honey he puts in his tea. The refrigerator organisation told you something about how long they had been a family, where things went, what they assumed about each other, the ease of people who have shared a kitchen for 30 years. I stood there the first afternoon and understood, not for the first time, that I was still learning the layout. The first evening went without incident. We ate on the porch, all of us. Nora's partner had joined for the first night, along with his child who ate half a piece of bread and fell asleep in his chair. The conversation moved between the drive, Frankfurt, Nora's urban planning work, a documentary someone had seen. I kept it moving. That is what I do at tables where I am the outsider who has been accepted but not quite absorbed. My husband sat across from me and was easy and warm in the way he is with his family. A version of him slightly more open than what I get in the apartment. I watched him laugh at something his father said and thought, this is what I chose. I meant it as a statement of something good. The evening was good in the way evenings are good when nothing is yet broken open. The second morning was warm. After breakfast, my husband and Tom walked to the beach. Margaret settled on the porch with a book. Nora was somewhere inside. I went to the outdoor shower. I set the cover up on the railing. The wood was warm already from the early sun and smelled of yesterday's sunscreen. I stepped under the water. Nora came out the side door. The moment lasted 3 seconds or 30. She was there. And then she was looking at me. And then she was looking at what was on my chest. The initials, large and deliberate, the kind of thing that cannot be read as accidental. Her face did nothing. Not outrage, not satisfaction. No expression I could organize myself around. If she had looked at me with accusation, or with the look of someone who has finally gotten what they needed, I could have built something in response. She looked at me the way you look at a fact, and then went back inside and said she was going to get coffee. I stood under the water. There was no useful thought to have in the shower after that. I turned off the water and went inside through the main door and got dressed. The cover-up stayed on the railing. At dinner I was charming, more charming than usual, filling pauses before they became pauses, asking follow-up questions, laughing at things precisely when it helped. I understood what I was doing while I was doing it, and understanding it while doing it was worse than if I had not noticed. Margaret looked at me once across the table with an expression I placed, for my own comfort, in the category of her usual mild disapproval of how I handle myself. It was not in that category. After dinner, Nora asked to speak with my husband. I saw them from behind the glass door. 2 chairs on the porch, a gap between them. His elbows were on his knees, his head down. Her hands were folded. They talked for a long time, and he did not look up toward the house for 20 minutes. I could not hear anything through the glass. I did not try to open the door. I told myself, this is Nora doing what she has wanted to do since I became part of this family, finding something to name. The thing is, I had given it to her. I could contextualize it, I could frame it, but I could not explain it away. He came to bed late. I said his name in the dark. He said, yeah, in the tone that means I have heard you and I am not starting anything tonight. I lay in the rental house dark and counted. 1 night down, 4 to go. That way of counting was new. I had not thought about the trip as nights to get through until that moment, in that bed, with the ocean pulling at the shore through the window. Through the glass, I could see the cover-up still on the railing, the white of it against the dark wood. I lay there and looked at it, and the thought that came was, I said I would get it removed. At some point, clearly enough to be remembered, the first summer my husband and I were together probably, when the cover-up was already a habit, and I had told myself it was temporary. I had said I would have that removed. It's from before. And then years had passed. The next morning I went out early and got it off the railing before anyone was awake. I folded it and put it in the suitcase and closed the zipper. Margaret and Tom left a day early. Tom mentioned the drive being easier on a Saturday morning. They hugged us both, and Margaret hugged me in the way she had always hugged me. Arms around me, weight leaning slightly away, a hug that was also a kind of conclusion. Nora left with them. That left 2 days. My husband and me, in the rental house, with the flat grey ocean and the pale wood floors. The morning after they left, we sat on the porch with coffee. The water was the colour of something undecided. He was quiet in the way he is when he has been thinking for a long time and has arrived somewhere specific. He said, without looking at me, that he did not know what the initials meant, or who they belonged to. But he could see they were something from before us, and he was trying to decide what that meant to him. He said it in the tone of someone actually deciding, not performing the attempt. He was simply sad, not organising himself around it, not managing me with it, just sad, in the plain way that requires someone to meet it without a strategy. I heard it as an opening. I told him just enough. It was from before, years ago, someone I no longer spoke to. I had meant to have it removed and had not gotten around to it. Every sentence was accurate. The omissions were the point, not the tattoo, not the initials, not even Remy by name, but the meetings and the studio and the last 3 months. He absorbed what I had given him and went quieter instead of better, which is how you know a partial truth has landed the way partial truths land. He asked flatly whether I had spoken to or seen anyone from before in the past month. I said no. That was the first direct lie. The other deceptions had been structural, arranged silences, redirected questions, things said to Priya or not said to him. This was a question put plainly and an answer that was simply false, and I watched myself give it from somewhere slightly outside myself. He nodded. He picked up his coffee. He looked at the water and said nothing more. I looked at the side of his face and thought briefly of the night he read logistics aloud at 1 a.m. I pushed the thought back, where it was easier to manage. The following week at the agency, I sat in the conference room working on the wellness campaign's next quarter. The brief was about trust and authenticity. I was building the sentences, choosing the phrasing that makes transparency feel aspirational rather than exposing, when I typed, "You cannot build trust on a covered foundation." I stopped. I read it back. Then, I read it back again. And there was a moment, I cannot tell you its exact duration, where I felt the specific shape of what I had been doing. Not the individual choices, but the whole structure, the cover-up, the meetings, the arranged silences, the way I had never once given my husband a complete picture of me. I had thought I was protecting something, a private self that no one could take because no one could see it. What I had actually been doing was preventing anyone from fully arriving. If no one had all of me, no one could take all of me. He was not going to take it. He had been reading port logistics aloud at 1 a.m. and making jurek from a transliterated recipe because that is who he was. He had already arrived. I had just been keeping him out of certain rooms. This thought stayed longer than thoughts like that usually do. I was very still inside all of it. Then I changed the line to transparency is the new luxury. I did not go back to the original. I closed the document, saved it, and opened my email. Whatever had opened in that conference room I had closed deliberately, and I was not going back through that door. I knew what was behind it. I had decided not to. That week my husband came home one evening and there were 2 manila folders on the kitchen table, He closed them when I walked in and said just things he was sorting. It was fine. I asked if I could help. He said no. I left it. The wedding photo had been on the hallway wall since we moved in, us laughing at something the photographer had said. A genuine laugh I remembered the feeling of. One evening, it was gone. The nail was still in the wall. My husband said he was going to spackle it. He did not spackle it. The nail stayed and I walked past it every morning and said nothing. 3 folders on the table by the following Thursday. He did not leave them out when I was home. I saw them once when I came in early, and then the next morning they were gone, and I did not look for where he kept them. Celia had stopped initiating contact. Priya's messages came more slowly with less in them. Simone, when I called, was warm and vague and deflected every direct question with something that sounded caring and said nothing. I attributed this to her being tired. The thing is, when everyone in your orbit goes quiet at roughly the same time, you can explain each absence individually and avoid looking at all of them at once. Priya stopped by my desk once that week and asked if everything was all right. I told her the campaign was at a complicated stage. She looked at me for a moment in a way that was different from the look she used to give me. Less delighted, more considering, and went back to her desk. Whatever she had enjoyed about being adjacent to this, she was beginning to understand its terms. I chose easier. I kept going. 3 weeks after the vacation, the apartment had changed in the way apartments change when 2 people are managing distance. Same objects in the same places, different air between them. My husband was home those weeks, not travelling, which was unusual. He was at the desk in the second room in the evenings instead of on the couch. He ate before I arrived home twice, and the third time he waited but did not ask about my day. 3 folders on the kitchen table now. I counted them every time I passed. The nightstand on his side, which used to hold whatever he was currently reading, was empty. He had moved his books to the desk. I noticed this on the second day of the 3-folder week and said nothing. He told me one evening, in a flat and even tone, that he had spoken to someone and wanted things handled properly. He said properly and did not explain what he meant by it, and then he went back to his desk. The non-elaborations sat in the apartment for several days after, dense and specific, the way certain silences are. I was having dinner with Simone at a restaurant near the apartment. Small round tables, chairs too close together, a menu that was reliable but not interesting. The window table was taken. I was eating, but not much. My phone buzzed. Remy. He had heard something. He was vague about what or from whom, and was asking if everything was all right. I should have set the phone face down and let it go. Instead, I called him. From the table, with Simone sitting across from me, her glass halfway to her mouth. He picked up after 2 rings. I told him my husband had found out something, that things were, and I stopped because I did not know how to finish the sentence. What I needed was for him to confirm that it had been real, that I had not burned 3 years of my marriage for something that was, on his end, just a convenient arrangement. I needed him to say that the weight I had been carrying was mutual. He said he was sorry to hear things were difficult. He said it in the exact tone of someone for whom this matter has already been filed under resolved. He said he hoped it worked out. The call lasted 4 minutes. I put the phone down. Simone had not moved. She was looking at the table in front of her. She said something about the bread and reached for it. I said something back. We did not talk about the call for the rest of dinner. That evening, my husband was at the kitchen table when I got home. Not at the folders, but near them, with a glass of water. He looked at me and said, "You did not end things with him. He ended things with you. And you have been carrying that ever since." I stood in the kitchen doorway. He was right. That was what made it impossible to argue with. Remy had not ended things dramatically, had simply gone quieter over months until the ending was understood without being spoken, and I had never been clearly chosen or clearly released. I had been carrying that open question for 3 years, organizing my life quietly around it, and my husband had seen it clearly enough to put it in 1 sentence, and the sentence was exact. There was a long silence between us after. Not the silence of a couple who have run out of things to say. A different kind, the kind that comes after something definitive. I refilled my glass of water, though I had not touched it. He waited. He said, after a pause, that the problem was never the tattoo. The problem was deciding for years what he was allowed to know about his own marriage. He said it once, not raised, not repeated. He set it down and left it there. Then he said he had spoken to someone and wanted things handled properly and thought I should stay somewhere else for a few weeks while the sorting happened. He said sorting. He said it in the tone of someone who has already done the deciding and is now describing a sequence of events. The sentences themselves were almost gentle. The tone was the threat. I thought of calling Priya. I picked up my phone and found her name and looked at our last exchange. The most recent message from her was 10 days old. Let's talk later this week, I have a thing. 10 days of silence from someone who used to respond within the hour is a specific kind of answer. I had known that for several days before I let myself name it. I set the phone down. The thing is, I had started all of this in my own accounting as a way to keep myself whole. Two versions of myself, neither of them false. I had thought that was management. I was sitting now in a quiet apartment with manila folders and a bare nail in the hallway wall, and management from here looked like something else entirely. 2 days later, Remy's Instagram went private. Not a block, just private, leaving the appearance of a door while removing the access. The signal was clear to anyone willing to read it. I read it anyway. My husband moved through the apartment with an organizational calm that was more frightening than any raised voice would have been. He arranged things. He answered my questions with complete sentences and did not elaborate. 7 years, counting from the beginning. The thing is, I had not been unhappy with him. I had not been looking for a way out. I had been looking for the version of myself that existed before I had to be consistent, and I had found it, and the holding of it had cost me everything. I was in the 3rd floor waiting room of a therapist's building when the process server came through the door and asked for my full name. I had made the appointment myself 6 weeks earlier, before this was as bad as it had become. The waiting room had upholstered chairs and a small side table with a plant on it, and the receptionist behind the frosted glass had offered me water when I came in. I confirmed my name. He handed me the envelope and left. 22 pages. A formal petition for dissolution of marriage. Temporary orders attached. I was to vacate the apartment within 14 days. Our joint accounts were flagged pending division proceedings. A first hearing was scheduled at the family court on a date 3 weeks out. I read the top page and then the second, and then set the document on my knees and looked at the plant for a moment. The woman across from me studied her phone without moving her eyes. The receptionist came over and placed a cup of water on the table beside me without being asked, then went back to her desk. She did not say anything. That was simply true, and I could not argue with it. The evidence in the petition included location data. My phone pinging near Remy's studio on 4 separate Monday afternoons. It included a photograph taken at a work event 6 weeks before any of this broke open. Priya had taken it, and it had travelled further than she had intended. She had sent it on, the petition suggested, after understanding she had been made an accessory without her knowledge. There was nothing in those 22 pages that had appeared from nowhere. Everything in it was earned. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a while. Then I called Simone and gave her my version. She said, "Marta, I was sitting across from you when you called him at dinner. I know what I saw." She was not unkind when she said it. She simply did not confirm the version. That was the last time I offered it. One text from Remy, an hour later. I heard what happened. I can't be involved in this. Then blocked. All platforms, clean and complete. He protected himself first, as he had always protected himself first, which was exactly what I should have seen years ago when he could not once rearrange his schedule around something I needed. The studio apartment I moved into is 2 neighbourhoods over, furnished by whoever had it before me, with a window that faces the building across the street. My salary covers it, narrowly, pending how the accounts are divided. There was a family group chat on my husband's side that I did not know I was in until I received the notification that I had been removed. Nora did not answer my message. Celia sent nothing. Priya checked in once and went quiet. In the agency elevator, a junior colleague asked how the beach vacation was. I said fine. I counted the floors. 9. I kept that part of me hidden because I believed you cannot lose what no one can fully see. I did not understand that I was also keeping my husband out, that the cover-up was not discretion, but a wall, and a wall does not distinguish between threats and people who are simply trying to arrive. He was already there. He had been there for years, reading aloud, learning the recipe. I just would not let him into the whole room. The thing is, I still cannot tell you exactly when it stopped being about him and started being about me. But I know now that it did. The cover-up is in the donation bag by the studio door. I have not dropped it off yet.